Everybody is enjoying their meal. If you read Amoris Laetitia, and I hope you did because we sent the link, maybe you are aware that, as far as I know it's the only papal letter or the exhortation that has a quote from a movie, from a film. Did you know that?
No.
No? Okay, so now you know. It actually quotes a movie called La Fête de Babette, Babette's Feast.
I spoke on that tonight.
Did you? All right. So Papa Francesco, Pope Francis, he likes that movie a lot. Who knows that movie? Okay, a couple of people. La Festa di Babette, film. Chi conosce? No? Ah, okay, so not so many people know about the film. Oh, you know about it. Okay, that's good. Okay, that's a very interesting movie. So Pope Francis, it's one of his favorite movies, and he quotes a little part of that movie in the apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia. And so just a quick summary about La Fête de Babette. So the movie is about a village. It's about a village in Denmark, a very rigorous community, Christian community, and there is a rigorous pastor. And everybody sort of afraid to make any changes. It's a very traditional village. And this pastor, he has two beautiful daughters. And any man who comes to meet those daughters, he always puts them down. So at the end, they never marry. Those two daughters never marry. But what happens is that to this village, there is a French woman, Babette. She comes from Paris, and she starts to make some changes in this village. Very beautiful changes. She starts to cook. She's a chef. Now we are at a feast. Beautiful Lebanese food. Who likes it? Like it? Wonderful. Grazie Tony e tutti quanti che hanno preparato e cucinato. So a feast. She wins the lottery in Paris, in France, and she decides to spend all of this money that she wins on a feast. So she orders beautiful exotic food. So this food is coming to this village, and people in the village are like, what's going on? What's gonna happen? They're saying, we are going to have a diabolical Shabbat or satanic feast or something, because they're afraid to enjoy food like we are enjoying the food today. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the movie. I'll let Claudia, Dr. Claudia Leal speak. So Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Taras. It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Dear friends, good evening. It's my pleasure today to be here with you. I thank Taras and Michael for this warm presentation. I also thank Halil for his generosity to share with me and with us his own tradition, his own ideas. And apologize because without a doubt, I will torture you with my English. So in your prayers, you can offer next hour like a penitence time, okay? I am happy that you are doing this delicious dinner, so my English will not be so terrible. Okay. Before starting, it's very important for me to remember some people. I had the privilege some years ago to be, like many of you, Russell Berry Fellow. And it gave me the opportunity not only to learn about interreligious dialogue in an academic way, but especially to meet extraordinary religious people who opened my horizons of understanding and offer me the possibility to imagining the world together. I remember Professors Menachem Loberbaum and Marshall Breger, whose courses influenced my way of doing research. I cannot forget Professor Adam Afterman and Rabbi Jack Bemporat, who, with infinite generosity, good humor, and patience, were our fellow travelers. And I am proud to say that I am a better Christian after my interreligious experiences, and we can live conversion to the truth together as believers. Today, I want to share with you some reflections on the current state of the theology, Christian theology of the family. After making a couple of quick references to the pastoral constitution Gaudium et Spes, I will focus on the apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia. Gaudium et Spes is a fundamental document for our church after Vatican II. In some sense, Gaudium et Spes is the key to understand how Catholic Church dialogue with reality, with history, with every single different tradition. My intention is to underline, on the one hand, the duty of religious traditions to speak of the family in a broader sense than we have done so far. And on the other hand, I want to affirm that the first step is to understand and value our own internal diversity. So, a couple of words about Gaudium et Spes. In an ecclesiological sense, Gaudium et Spes represents a Copernican revolution because the dynamics already applied by St. Paul and Jesus in the Gospels open the gates of Christian and Catholic identity to set up that mankind is a single family. Mankind is a single family in its origin and its destiny. This ecclesiology, as often been said, transcends previous interpretations about extra ecclesia nulla salus. You know, before Vatican II, if you are not Catholic, hell. Okay. After Vatican II, that changed, and you know. Yeah. So, without formally cancelling its magisterial validity, thank you. Without formally cancelling its magisterial validity, this formula changed its meaning and creates a new hermeneutic horizon for its interpretation. In the same way that St. Paul argued and persuaded the early community that you don't need to be a Hebrew to be a Christian, Vatican II tries to persuade us that it's not necessary to be under the boundaries of Catholicism to belong to the Church of Christ, because those boundaries are not totally useful and there are other ways, mysterious but clear, in which a human being is a witness of Christ. More specifically about our topic, Gaudium et Spes dedicated specifically a chapter to the dignity of marriage and family, and sets the basis for the rearrangement of the marriage purposes in doctrinal and canonical terms. You know, before Gaudium et Spes, the main purpose of family in Catholic tradition was procreation. After Gaudium et Spes, we say procreation, of course, but at the same level, mutual reciprocity. Reciprocity about help, love, and fraternity. Without set it as a primary purpose, but as a necessary consequence of the famous notes of renewal and pastoral care that, in opinion of Giuseppe Alberigo, represent the principal novelty of the Council proposal as a whole, and acquires a singular character in the Constitution. Renewal and pastorality are moving the Council to set up the priorities of evangelization. In number 52, marriage is seen as a social issue and not only as an institution relevant for the individual life. This is avant-garde reflection in the context of the social ethical theories of modernity that for so long time consider marriage and the family as institution of the private sphere, removing them from the public scrutiny and leaving, sometimes unprotected, their most fragile members, women and children. There is evidence that the later magisterium did not develop enough this aspect of the Constitution. And until today, it privileged a perspective that overemphasized the perfection of the marital bond as the basis of family. It is the language of Gaudium et Spes, more than its actual content, which is opening horizons to that today in the apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia. The magisterium of the Church addresses itself specifically to pregnant women, parents-in-law, grandparents, divorced fathers and mothers. Putting a face on the ties of human love is the first step toward a theological anthropology that fosters human experience in the light of faith. Through Gaudium et Spes, the Church shows that God's saving action has no limits and that at the same time it is put into play in every human reality. Salvation is universal and at the same time relative to every human event. Now, some words about Amoris Laetitia. From the first numeral of the document, Pope Francis makes use of the plural and he speaks of families. How should that language be interpreted? Perhaps as the transition from a kind of static vision of the Christian family which tended to idealize it. Not wrong concept, but idealize, toward a more dynamic one that without renouncing the Christian ideal, recognize that there are indeed different types of family. And if we want to talk with the religions of the world, with the cultures of the world, we need to put attention to that. The synodal debate that precedes and gives rise to the document shows how this fact is at the center of the concerns of the local churches. Peacefully accepting the plurality of families, mixing ourselves with that plurality pastorally and spiritually can be dizzying for large sectors of our community, but at the same time is a way of being church that has been repeated over time. Throughout our history, a vital dynamic has allowed us to dialogue with the culture and test our moral and theological standards. In this case, the theological and ethical contents of the tradition are at the service of the encounter, and only in subsequent moments, once the relationship of reciprocal trust is built, do they acquire prominence. Identity, individual and personal collective identity is a process of opening and folding. We open our identity to enrich, contrast, and include, and folding to define. In Francis' vision, the present time is the moment of openness, also in what refers to family spirituality. It might seem paradoxical that, on the one hand, Francis affirms that the family, quote, goes through a deep cultural crisis. He said that in Evangelii Gaudium, and at the same time, he says it is possible that in the midst of an objective situation of sin, one person can live in the grace of God, one can love, one can also grow in the life of grace and charity, receiving the help of the church for this. These affirmations acquire coherence when see that what Francis does is walking toward a new identity of the Christian family. This new identity, which does not cancel other visions, other versions, but rather joins in coherence with the inclusive dynamics of semina verbi, that idea that comes from fathers of the church that has allowed it to go beyond, open the frontiers. In other words, we need to ask ourselves again, like many Christian communities did in the history, what defines a Christian family today? What is the place of sacramental marriage when we talk about Christian family? To go further, maybe there is a certain style of living, the way in which this family celebrates its joys, endures its pains, and lives its daily life in relationships of reciprocal love and care, face to the community. On this basis, it is legitimate to build maximalist moral horizons, as any religious tradition has done and does, without falling into fallacious ecclesiologies where belonging to the tradition is given by standards of authenticity relative to the pure and simple compliance and non-compliance with precepts. This is obviously a disputed area. Our own research about the ways in which the concrete protagonist of family ministry in the Chilean church understanding the evangelization of families reveals the contrast between an evangelization that consists in announcing the beauty of the Christian family and, on the other hand, a version of Catholic family ministry that aspires to enter into dialogue with families who, for different reasons, are and will be in a very different situation from the one that our Christian tradition has proposed during the last centuries as horizon of life. In this sense, I'd like to share just one date about Chile. In Chile today, 77% of children are born out of the marriage institution. 77. Wow. And we are talking about Chile, Latin America, Christian continent. In Latin America, Chile and Uruguay are the most secularized countries, okay? But this is the number. These two models of family evangelization can even coexist in the same parish, in the same school, same movement or apostolate, and it is possible that only in moments of tension or conflict Thus the tension between the two come to light. The healthiest alternative is probably to maintain a certain degree of tension between these approaches to family evangelization, of course, with both paradigms challenging and complementing each other. What is evident, however, is that today, in order to speak of the family in a spiritual and religious sense, remembering the doctrine alone is not enough. With Amoris Laetitia, Catholic Church tries to be linguistically closer to all familiar realities, and this is a movement in order to answer cultural questions in a world where marriage is not always as strong as before, but where family represents a sort of meaning and happiness for most people. Just to conclude, a big part of our communities is experiencing juridically and symbolically the declining institution of marriage. And this situation often causes impotence and perplexity in Catholic communities, which perhaps do not notice that at the same time that the desire for marriage is decreasing, however, the desire for family is increasing. If we do not ask ourselves honestly about the reasons for this phenomenon in a spirit of empathy and good faith, it's likely we will ignore the experience, especially the experience of the most vulnerable groups in our society. Family models change, mute, adapt, and nevertheless continue to be recognized in the image of that core where unique persons, just as they are, find acceptance, protection, refuge, and committed interlocutors to share their lives. Social science provides us with empirical data, both quantitative and qualitative, that confirm the relevance of the family as a space for growth and meaning for human beings in all cultures and societies. This data should stimulate the science in general and theology in particular to explore in detail the resources that families deploy in very diverse cultural and religious contexts to care for life. Finally, I want to say it's so strong for me. If I ask to you, who are you? Who are you? The answer will be necessarily the story of your family. I'd like to ask every one of you, I'd like to listen, every one of you, the story of your family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Really gives some new insights into Amoris Laetitia for me, at least, how the church not changed the doctrine on marriage and family, because the church cannot really change its foundations. The dogma is the same. It still sees the family as we saw it, many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago, and we say that family was the first sacrament, marriage was the first sacrament, instituted already in the Garden of Eden between Adam and Eve. So the church does not change its doctrine, right? There are certain elements which we might develop within the doctrine, or we might sort of adopt the interpretation to the needs of time. So that's, I think, it's really, really fascinating. Thank you again. And now we have Halil. And Halil, you will have a huge responsibility because I think you are the only Muslim in the group. Are there any other Muslims? So you have huge responsibility. You represent Islam for us. 2 billion Muslims almost, right? But no pressure, no pressure. So we would like to hear from you. Your feedback to Claudia's presentation? What do you think is similar in Islam? What is different? what challenges are for the family, for the institution of family in Islam. And I'm sure they might be similar, because the rates of divorce in the world, especially after the pandemic, because as Michael said, we thought that the pandemic is going to bring people together and be happy. And no, you see that the rates in some countries for divorce, they went up because people could not take it. I mean, they could not stay with the partner, with their spouse for such a long time, closed in one space. Well, anyway, Halil, the mic is yours now.
Thank you, Taras, and thank you, Michael, for providing the space for today, for this, for the lovely crowd here, and thank you, Claudia, for your presentation. I need to start with, as you started earlier, I would like to start with a prayer, as a Muslim is asked to say the prayer in every his act. It's just that I will start in the name of God. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And I want to little say about what you said, Taras. I'm not speaking for Islam. I'm just speaking, I cannot speak for Islam because it is a very diverse tradition. There are many different interpretations. Any religious person can say that, and I don't have the proficiency as Claudia does. It's not my field. The only resources I've assessed in order to give you a little overview of marriage in Islam is the Quran and the Hadith. This is just my reading of these texts, so see it as you definitely guys are familiar with the tradition of scriptural reasoning.
Yep.
I'm reading scripture and I'm just giving you a interpretation of how this text speaks to me. So I will just give you also to start this off a little review and overview of Amoris Laetitia, a few points and takeaways from my reading, and then give you a little overview of marriage and the concept of family in Islam. In my reading of Amoris Laetitia, the text is a close reading of family life, with spiritual insights and practical wisdom useful for every human, couple or person who want to build a family. Above all, it is the result of attention to how people have lived over many years. As you have said, it is a change of language. It's not a change of doctrine. The exhortation Amoris Laetitia on love in the family indeed speaks the language of experience and of hope. However, Amoris Laetitia notes families face many challenges, from migration to ideological denial of differences between sexes, ideology of gender, from the culture of provisional to the anti-birth mentality, and the impact of biotechnology in the field of procreation. From the lack of housing and work, of the impact of pornography and abuse of minors, from inattention to persons with disabilities, to the lack of respect for the elderly, from the legal dismantling of the family to violence against women. However, Amoris Laetitia asks the Church to meet people where they are, to consider the complexities of people's lives, and to respect people's conscience when it comes to moral decisions. The apostolic exhortation is mainly a document that reflects on family life and encourages families, but it is also the Pope's reminder that the Church should avoid simply judging people and imposing rules on them without considering their struggles. Using insights from the Synod of Bishops on the family and from Bishops' Conference from around the world, Pope Francis affirms church teaching on family, life and marriage, but strongly emphasizes the role of personal conscience and pastoral discernment. He urges the Church to appreciate the context of people's lives when helping them and make good decisions. The goal is to help families, in fact, everyone experience God's love and know that they are welcome members of the church. Next, I want to present, I'm sorry, I cannot speak freely, I'm not used to this. I'm reading, I'm sorry, I hope you can follow what I'm saying here. In the next section, I'm going to present marriage in the Quran and read. Oh, I had some takeaways from, I'm sorry, I'll step back. I had some takeaways from Amoris Laetitia. First, the church needs to understand families and individuals in all their complexity. Second, the role of conscience is paramount in moral decision making. Third, remarried and divorced Catholics need to be more fully integrated into the church. Fourth, all members of the family need to be encouraged to live good Christian lives. 5, we should no longer focus on people and speak about people living in sin. 6, consider that what works in some places might not work in others. 7, traditional teaching on marriage are affirmed, but the church should not burden people with unrealistic expectations. 8, children must be educated in sex and sexuality. 9, gay men and women should be respected. And finally, the message is that everyone is welcome. So now I'm going to present marriage in the Quran. I have collected a few verses, which, again, this is not all of it, these are just experts of some of the passages referring to marriage. The first one says, "Did we not create you in pairs?" In the second verse, it says, "It is he who created you all from one soul, and from it made it mate, so that he might find comfort in her." In another verse, a similar idea is revealed. It says, "Another of his signs is that he created spouses from among yourselves, for you to live with in tranquility. He ordained love and kindness between you. There truly are signs in those who reflect." My reading of these verses is that humanity is indeed created by God with relationship in mind, specifically marriage, the union of two. In another set of verses, it says in the Quran, "They are as garments to you, as you are to them." For me, that strikes the idea that the text speaks to the mutuality or reciprocity in relationship building, especially for married couples. And there's an interesting and very moving reference in the Surah 93, verse 7, where it says, "Find you in need." The Prophet is addressed. God says, "Find you in need and satisfied your need." But the reference is here to Khadija, his wife, who garmented the Prophet when he was in material and emotional need. Indeed, after the first revelation on Mount Hira in Mecca, the Prophet was terrified to have been given the word of God, the Quran, by the angel Gabriel, and rushed home to find ease and calm by his wife Khadija, who covered him literally with a blanket and assured him that he would be fine, that God would care for him and give him the strength and the means for his mission. As we see the happening of the metaphor of the garment in the life of the Prophet himself, as his wife was providing the space for him, and for Muslims especially, the Sunnah, meaning the practices and the sayings of the Prophet, are a means to imitate his life. So it's a pious act for Muslims to imitate his life. What I want to say is that his the metaphor of the garment in a marriage should also apply for any individual Muslim. This would be a very pious act to go on the steps of the Prophet himself. And marriage is a sunnah of the Prophet himself. In one of the traditions of the Prophet, in the collection of Sahih Muslim, Book 8, the Book of Marriage, it is reported that the Prophet has said, whoever marries safeguards his life. Whoever marries safeguards half of his faith, and the fear of God is the other half. In another tradition, it is reported from the Prophet that he said, a young man, those among you who can support a wife should marry, for it restrains eyes from chasing evil glances and preserves from immorality. But he who cannot afford it should observe the fast, for it is a means of controlling desires, especially the sexual one. From this hadith, it is recommended for young men to marry, first of all, to restrain from immoral behavior. But I want to bring to your attention that it is conditioned on the state of a person. If he is able to meet the needs, material as well as emotional and personal, of another person, only then does a marriage also serve as a means for become a better person in the sight of God. This is not to say that each find fulfillment in the other, as that the other is necessary to become the person God has intended for us to become. Rather, the emphasis is on having the necessary condition in order to share a common journey to God, to serve as garment and as a mirror of the image of God. And considering that question for this event, I would say, humanity, by reflecting upon the Quranic verses, was created by God with relationship in mind, specifically marriage. And marriage and family is theologically important, and from my understanding of today's event, and our faiths have the resources to promote a divine conception of the family. Thank you.